Hi, this is Kristina Olsen with John Broughton, and you are listening to Retrospectives on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Look, just to begin, you grew up in the Haight-Ashbury area at the height of the cultural explosion that happened there in the 60s. What effect did that have on you as a young girl growing up?
You know, I guess it had a lot of effect, except as a little kid, you don't know that you had it. You know, no matter how weird your life is, it's normal because it's the only thing you know. So, you know, there were protests in this that we went to as a family, or my mom and my brothers and I we would walk and hold signs. And, you know, as a little kid, you don't know what all that is about, but you do it because that's what you do. And I certainly got to hear music of that era then when I was a little girl. I think I saw Joan Baez when I was 5 years old. And it was quite a scandal because she wore a miniskirt in a Unitarian church.
Oh, even no.
Yeah, I know, radical, huh? And, you know, my dad got a record player when I must have been about 7 or 6 years old, and that was a big deal for us. And it was in a little box, like a little suitcase, you know, and it came with a free 45. And on one side was Bob Dylan, Like a Rolling Stone, and on the other side was the Freedom Singers, I think, singing. So, I mean, that was kind of a wild thing to have that be your background. My dad was a classical musician and didn't like any of the protest music, and my mom and my brothers and I loved it. We listened to it a lot. Buffy St. Marie we listened to back then, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Do you think your life might have charted a totally different course had you grown up somewhere else?
You know, I do think that's a crystal ball question, you know,
yeah.
And go back, but a reverse crystal ball question. But I think and I hope I would have found music and writing because it's probably my biggest passion. But what kind of music and writing would it have been? You know, like I was really bad at classical music. I got what I called child abuse, which was years and years of piano lessons. And I had to have been the worst piano student ever. So that was, you know, if I was raised in, I don't know, Alaska, my dad was still a classical pianist, I probably would have still gone down the classical music track and failed at it. So who knows, you know, but yeah, when I first heard blues, that was the first music I really loved. And I heard Mance Lipscomb, and I just love his sweet voice and amazing sound. You know, it was music that was so deeply, richly emotional. And a lot of the music that I'd listened to from my dad was very classical and very like Bach now, which I love, but as a little kid, it was just too mental for me. And when I found the blues music, it was like, yeah, that's feeling something. So I love that music.
So piano was your first instrument?
Yes.
So when did the guitar kick in?
When I was 11, I went to some kids camp, and there was a counselor there who played guitar. At the time, I thought she was a man because she had really short hair and was very masculine looking. And I took guitar from her, and I totally fell in love with her. And yeah, that was the first time I ever experienced guitar, and it was Nirvana. And of course, my dad forbade it because he said it would lead to teenage pregnancy and heroin use, and that was really all the encouragement I needed. So I'd sneak out the illicit guitar, and my dad didn't know it, but I would take lessons from Frank Hamilton, who was in the Weavers. He was my first guitar teacher.
Oh, wow.
He's an incredible man. He's still alive, and he's in Georgia now, I think. And I've actually sent an email to him recently, and he remembered teaching me, which is astonishing. A little shy, nervous little kid. He said I was very serious. I guess I was. And he said I always had a book because it took me hours on the bus to get to where he lived. So I'd take a bus like 2.5 hours to get there, and a lot of walking as well. And it was so precious, you know, and I'd do anything to take those lessons. So that's when I started the guitar.
I was actually reading another interview with you the other day where you made mention of a choir teacher that told you had a bad voice and couldn't sing. As a shy, nervous young girl as you were, that must have been incredibly discouraging at the time.
Yeah, everything was against me playing music. Everyone said I had no talent, and it was definitely amazing that I persevered. It must be just totally credit to blind, stubborn, idiotic perseverance without any encouragement at all. And I never thought I could make a living at it. I never thought I could anyone would listen to me. But it was very clear to me that I'd have to create music to keep my sanity. That was very clear. So, and I didn't, in the early days, I used to sing on top of the roof. We lived in a house in LA that was right on a very busy, almost like a freeway. And so I would sit on the roof and sing where no one could hear me. And the freeway noise would drown me out. And I actually kind of accidentally developed a strong blues voice just by singing in such a loud and terrible place. But, then people would say, "Oh, you've got a good singing voice." And I'd think, people will just lie right to your face. I know I have a terrible voice. I've been told that by professionals, choir teachers and such. Yeah, it was a funny thing.
So was there ever going to be a different career option for you, or was it always going to be music?
Well, there was nothing encouraging me in music, so that it was just my own stubbornness. But I did lots of other things, and I actually enjoyed probably my favorite straight job that I had was working for a big computer company, and I was like a troubleshooter. I was kind of way down on the totem pole. They needed people who were smart enough to figure out why the mainframes would crash, but they needed people who were also totally unambitious, because there was this one job which, the programming would mess up and it would make these error messages that were the size of, New York phone directories. And my job was to go in and figure out what had caused the machine to blow up. And it was really fun for someone like me. It was like a puzzle. I like puzzles. I like games. So I'd sit there and get paid better than I'd ever been paid before in my life to figure out what code blew up the mainframe. And then when I finally figured out what it was a lot of typing to fix it. And I just listened to music at the time in my headphones. So it was a great job, and at the same time, I was trying to get my music career on its feet. So I'd go there to make as much money as I could, and then I'd leave and go on the road and lose all the money I made. And so it was kind of like this flexible job that was always there for me. And and they were crying, like when I'd leave, they're like, "We need someone to do what you're doing. Do you have any friends?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've got friends." So I trained a gal who was in my songwriting group to do the same job. And she has the same kind of mind. I think, writing a song is such a puzzle that, sync us onto some computer code that's gone wrong, and we'll do the same thing. It's really fun. So she and I shared an office, and I'd go off on the road, and she'd step into my job, and then I'd come back, and she'd go off on the road, and it was perfect, actually, except then they needed more people. So we ended up with like 6 musicians in this weird little department that was really straight corporate America, like all these people in suits, and oh my God, the high tech back then in the 80s, the passcode things that would open the doors, like, and we would stumble in at 11 or 12, and they were like, "Could you get here earlier?" And we're like, "No, actually, we can't. Sorry." And because they needed us, they couldn't really fire us. It was great. And it was stupid, too, because they wanted us to go to meetings and do all these things that had nothing to do with what we were doing. And the mainframes were faster at night, which is when we did our best work. So we're like, no, we come in late and we'll fix things when no one else is here working. It made good sense. But I actually enjoyed that job. but I was doing it in service of music. And had I been, and had I actually had a corporate mind, I would have crawled up in their ranks. But the funny thing is they were all like dying of ulcers and things because it was so stressful, and we were so unstressed. We wouldn't wear the clothes they wanted us to wear. We'd come in and leave when we wanted, and we get paid well. So we were happy as hell.
Yeah. How do you look back now on your very first songwriting efforts? Can you pinpoint a moment in time where you started to develop a self-confidence that you said to yourself, "Hey, I'm not bad at this"?
Oh God, self-confidence. I don't remember ever feeling that. Isn't that a funny thing to say? No. I remember Mainly I remember this incredible feeling after writing a song of sort of a deep peace. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was confidence and it still happens so many decades later when I write something, especially something that the muses are involved with. I feel like I'm not the vehicle. I'm just a vehicle to take a pen and a recorder down. It feels like something else has moved through me, and that's a joyous feeling. And I think about so many songwriters when they start thinking I'm a genius or that sucks. It's like that kind of thinking doesn't help the songwriting at all. It kind of it totally distracts from it. And the great thinking is this working or is it not working? And what can I do to make it work better? That's the kind of thinking we have to do. But as soon as you start thinking of yourself in a way of like, this is really something, it's usually when everything stops and falls apart. So, I wouldn't say I've ever had a feeling of confidence in that way, but I have had feelings of extreme, deep, profound peace when I've been used by the muses to write. And that's a lovely thing. And there's lots of songs that I've mechanically written, and I'm not that happy with those. I think they're good practice pieces, but they're not the ones that give me great joy. And the ones that give me joy are the ones that I really had nothing to do with, as far as I can tell.
Being proficient in a number of instruments as you are, does that give you a greater scope in your songwriting? I mean, do you always write with the same guitar, or does that diversity of musicianship give you a broader scope to work with?
Yeah, you exactly know my brain. That's exactly what's going on. And I'm not very good at very many instruments, I don't think, but they're fantastic. It's like having a different color palette for an artist. In certain songs, they come because of the instrument. When I go to the piano, which I'm still crap at, a really different song will come out than if I go to the guitar or a hammered dulcimer or concertina or whatever. And sometimes it's delightful to write without an instrument because I realize my limitations on any instrument often will limit the piece that I'm writing. The melody might be loftier than I can support with my instrument. So it's kind of a freeing thing to write without an instrument and then have to hammer down an arrangement using some instrument. But yeah, definitely, exactly right.
What about editing? Do you go through a pretty heavy editing process with your writing? And is there a certain point that you reach when you know song's finished?
Another good question. Gosh, you're good. You're full of them today. Editing. I've had a songwriting group that's been meeting since 1979, and I would say they're my editors. And I'm always trying to get things past them. Like, yeah, this'll do it, and they'll come back and they go, "You're being lazy, Kristina. You're gonna have to. No, you can't do that." So they bust me. I'm always trying to slink away with not working too hard, and they completely bust my butt. They've been amazing. So yeah, and for me, I think almost any writer you talk to will say that it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration, which is the editing process. And it's the least fun part, but it will make a song or not. I think when it's easy to just go with what comes naturally, and there's a lot of incredible depth and beauty in that. But to make it translatable to the listener, it usually takes a bit of extra work. And it's wonderful having really sharp ears. My songwriting group, they know every stupid thing I do, and they can listen and they know when they can bust me, and it's every week. Every week they find something. Yeah, you're going to have to rewrite that part. Okay.
I was going to ask you about that songwriters group. It sounds like a wonderful thing to be a part of, and you've been with it for so long. What is it about that group that particularly has enhanced your writing over the years?
I would say the biggest thing, which isn't very complimentary, it's just the deadline. I am a lazy person, and having a weekly deadline means I will actually, for fear of shame, I will sit down and do the thing I love more than anything else, which is writing music. But it's so hard to get started. My grandpa said once, a job started is a job half done. And I think, yeah, that's exactly right. To get me to sit down and do something I love is very difficult. And it's fear of shame from my group. So, yeah.
Hey, when we first exchanged emails, you were on a bike ride, and I discovered that you were quite an avid bike rider. And I've spoken to other songwriters who often get the inspiration for songs while driving their car. Can it happen on a bicycle as well?
You know, that's another wonderful question. Geez, Louise. For me, no. And oddly, you know, I've been teaching songwriting classes for a long, long time, and just about every single class I've ever taught, I ask people, where do you write? Because to me, that's a fascinating topic. And the number one answer is in the car. That's fascinating to me. And I do not ride in the car, and I do not ride on a bike. I don't know. My brain just does not work in that way. The number two answer, and this is decades of teaching songwriting, is something having to do with water. Isn't that wild? Like in the shower, walking by a stream or an ocean, or washing dishes, like something with water. And, you know, it just fascinates me because that's how people write. Not me, but me, it's like the pain and shame of showing up to my group empty-handed. And I'll, at the last possible minute, curse them mightily and sit down with an instrument and start to do what I love to do more than anything else. but no, I don't ride at all in cars or on bikes, and I love riding bicycles. In fact, I was that bike ride I was on was with Joyce, who was the original member of my songwriting group.
Oh wow!
So yeah, we had a field trip, and we got out of songwriting. We said we canceled that week. We said we're on a field trip. Forget it.
There's very much a humorous element to your work, both in your songwriting and in live performance. How important is humour in music to you?
Very, very important, and it wasn't always. In my early years, of being a songwriter, I joke, but it was serious. Every single club I played in closed within 2 months of me playing there, and I was one of those deathly serious singer-songwriters who only wanted to sing incredibly tragic, navel-gazing songs. And so it wasn't until I went and saw Jesse Winchester at a concert, and it was at a time when I was having a lot of back pain, and I didn't know anything about him except I heard he did great R&B, and I was really tired, and I thought, well, it'll cheer me up and it'll make me happy. R&B music is so great. And this very skinny man came out with a nylon string guitar and started to play the most beautiful songs, such beautiful songs. And the seats in this little venue were all hard metal folding chairs. And it was so beautiful, but my back was killing me. And I just thought, you know, I'm not comfortable sitting here. I'm in too much pain. And I reached down to get my bag to go. And just then he did what he called the skinny man's dance. He stood up and did this most awkward and horrible dance. And I laughed so hard. And I remember thinking, my back doesn't hurt anymore. How come? How did he do that? I was just leaving because I was so uncomfortable, and now I feel like staying. And as a performer sitting in the audience, I was like, wait a second, there's something to this. And I realized that an audience, they're just sitting in a chair, unless that's a dance band or something. They're just sitting, and their lungs are kind of slumped into a little lump, and they're hardly breathing. And if the performer gets them to laugh, they actually inhale because they've just kicked out all the air in their lungs. And man, it feels great. You know, your body suddenly wakes up and you have all that beautiful oxygen. And I thought, that's a trick. He tricked us into breathing deeply. And, you know, you can't usually tell an audience, especially in Australia, okay, everyone, I want you to take a big cleansing breath because it'll make you feel better. They'll just stop breathing because they're mavericks, especially in Australia. But if you make them laugh, they can't help it. So I learned that trick from him first. And then I took an incredible performance workshop from Gamble Rogers, who's now passed away. And he talked about, it was an amazing workshop. And I realized I had to actually work on being funny on stage so that people would listen to my serious, sad songs, which is what I really wanted to do. I just wanted to play tragic songs. You know, the only way I could afford it is to get people laughing. Wow. So it became something that I had to learn to do. It wasn't natural.
One thing I've always liked about your songs, there's always been a great diversity of subject matter in your songwriting. Is that something you're very conscious of when writing, or even constructing a set list or putting together album tracks for an album, to not go too much down the one path in terms of subject matter?
Nice. It is not something that I think about when I'm writing. In fact, it really annoys me that I tend to do songs in batches of 3. Like I'll do 3 motorboat sort of rocky songs, and then I'll do 3 waltzes, and it really annoys me because I get sick of it. It's like, I don't want to write another waltz, but that's what comes into my brain. So I just have to let my brain, or the muse or whoever follow the path it wants. But yes, very much in a set list. I think if you play too many similar songs, the audience just goes brain dead. So I'd really work hard at changing the tempo and the key and the rhythm structure and topic matter, all those things. I'll work really hard on a set list to keep that variety so the audience is excited. And I would say my albums are too all over the map. I wouldn't listen to my own records. Be like, yeah, if I want to hear something mellow, I'm going to put on, Miles Davis Kind of Blue. If I want to hear something, I don't want to hear something all over the map. I usually get in a zone. I want some, an album that'll put me in a mood. If I need to stay awake and I've got a long drive, I'm going to put on some Dire Straits or something. I don't know. I would. It's a bad thing that I do in my own albums. It's just because that's what I've got to work with, I guess.
Do you ever suffer from the dreaded songwriter's block? Does that hit you from time to time?
Pretty much no. And I think there was one period where I had it for a bit, and I think I realized what it was. And it's if you ever get an accolade for a song, if people say, oh, that's a genius song, oh my God, you're a genius. As soon as they say that, then, or, you win an award or something, then what I do, and I think most people do this, is they secretly know that we're not geniuses. We're just writers. We just have some good things and some bad things. Every writer writes a lot of crap, a lot of crap. In order to write a good song, you have to write a bunch of things you throw away. And so the problem is if people give you too many accolades, then suddenly you don't want to write another song because it'll prove that you're not a genius, that in fact, it just occasionally you get lucky, and most of the time you just are a writer and you write all sorts of things. So when I kind of noticed that, it's back to what I was talking about before, the ego thing. As soon as you're saying this is genius, this is great, or this is crap, it's just not helping. It's not helping at all. It is destroying the artist, because you have to stay in that magical muse place. And by thinking about how good or bad you are, you've left it. You've lost it. You're all ego now, and it doesn't help anything. So I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I figured out pretty early. Don't think about that kind of stuff, because don't win too many awards.
And noticed on your website a wonderful resource you've provided there, a list of performance and songwriting tips. Are those tips a golden set of rules that you always stick to yourself, or are they bendable from time to time?
I hope I stick to them. They're mostly hard won from lots of mistakes I've made. So, I think I stick to them pretty good, but I haven't read those for a while, so who knows? But I do think I stick to them.
You've been studying a music degree in recent times too, I believe. What inspires an experienced musician and songwriter of so many years to go back to school, so to speak?
It's such a weird thing, music, because in the early days, I wanted to study it more. I really did want to study, and I started having some success, and so I was touring, and so I couldn't go to school. So it was kind of like, there's almost no career that's like that, where you get an accidental success and then you're a professional, even though you haven't had any training. It's like, whoa. So all these years, I think about 20 years ago, I said to my songwriting group, I really want to study orchestration, because I'd had a dream. I often dream music, and in my dream, it was an incredibly beautiful piece of music. And at that point, I had only ever dreamt original music. So I know that if I'm dreaming a piece, I know to wake myself up to write it down. It's this big battle, and my brain is like, get up and write it down. And my sleepy self is like, oh, you'll remember tomorrow, which never happens. And so, but this piece was just incredible. And as I was listening to it, I could see 64 staves of music, printed music, scrolling by my eyes. And it was such an incredible experience. And so I woke myself up, and I only had a handful of notes, like a couple notes left, because I didn't have the facility to write that kind of thing down. And so I was so frustrated because my lack of knowledge was just, the muses just gave me something incredible, and my lack of knowledge destroyed it. And so I was telling my songwriting group, I really want to study music seriously. And they were like, you'd hate it. You have to jump through all these hoops at music school. You'd hate it. And I'm like, I don't think I would. But they did give me this wonderful woman who I took private composing lessons for a while until she had a child and didn't have time. And then I finally realized with the advent of online school that I could go to school and still tour. So for 5 years, I cut my touring back, and I went to Berklee College of Music online. And initially I studied orchestration and arranging, because that's that knowledge I wanted for in case that dream ever comes back. But then I'd finished all the classes but one, and I realized it was so much computer work, which you'd think I'd be into from my early jobs. But it was just like all mouse work, and I was thinking, I really miss playing. So I talked to my advisor and said, I want to go do a dual major, and I want to be a guitar major so I can work on guitar. And he's like, you don't want to do that. It'll add 2.5 years to your schooling. I'm like, that sounds great. So I went back and got a dual major, and it was wonderful because there's all these things. When I'm writing, I hate it when my inner ear hears something that my intellect can't touch. Like I can hear something, but I'm grabbing it on the instrument and I can't find it. So that was just a very wonderful 5 years of giving my intellect more knowledge so that when I hear something that's beyond me, I'll hopefully have more facility to grab it. And it was a joy. It's hard to keep meeting with the glass ceiling of your abilities, and to see it. And it's like, I'm repeating myself. I don't want to do that.
Hey, Australia's become pretty much a second home to you over the years, and it feels kind of weird not to have had you out here for well over a year now because of the state of things in the world.
I know.
What did you, looking back to the very first time you came here, did you know what to expect? Did you have any preconceived notions of what it would be like down here?
I knew nothing, beyond nothing. It's embarrassing how little we Americans know about Australia. And especially me, I was just a head in the clouds person, and I thought kangaroos and beaches, like, yeah, let's go. I had the things that most delighted me and surprised me was the Australian sense of humor, which I adore. And it's very unique. And, that was a joy, and that the kind of beauty of nature is incredible. And yeah, it was and like, it sounds corny, but of course the people, which is everywhere in the world, but I found just so many great people in Australia that I've fallen completely in love with and can't not return, so I'll see my best friends.
What you do when you do come down here, which is not what a lot of artists do, but you take yourselves to some far and away places. You don't just stick to the major cities, you really tour extensively. You can go to places that many Australians have probably never heard of or been to. Is that something you do worldwide in other countries as well, or is that just something about Australia that you really like to go far and wide?
It's a miracle to me that I get to travel to such amazing places. And, I've usually lived pretty broke in my life. I haven't ever been very wealthy. And so the fact that I can go to places that I couldn't have ever afforded to get to is incredible. And it would just be a waste to not really go exploring. And I love exploring. So I do that. We both said do twice. That's funny. I do that, 3 times. When I travel anywhere, pretty much. Like a bike and barge tour in Holland, and some weird bushwalking in New Zealand, and a sled dog ride in Alaska. Yeah, I like to do a bit of adventuring when I'm out. And it's a bit of a problem because the government, you get a work permit and they're like, no, you're supposed to work every day and then leave. And I don't do that. I work a couple days and I go on a nice trip, and do something fun. And they're like, no, what are you doing? You must be dealing drugs or something because you're not making that much and you're not leaving quickly. You're not like the rest. So, yeah.
And you've even chosen to record albums here as well. So obviously we're more than just a touring destination.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
amazing musicians that I've, Peter Grayling and George Batromlis are such incredible buddies, musical buddies. And so, yes, of course, I've had to record there to capture them.
You've actually worked with Peter Grayling quite extensively over a long period of time. Where did you first catch up with Peter? What makes him such a great touring colleague for you?
Peter, there's so many things I could say about all the great things about Peter, but the things that make him great, I'll answer the questions in reverse order, are one, he's a really funny man, but he acts the straight man. So it actually, I mean, this is probably the last reason on the list, but it's actually quite important. He makes a really good straight man for my humor, which is very funny. It's rare to find a cellist who can improvise. I have always loved the cello. It's just one of my favorite sounding instruments. It's a really hard instrument to play, and there are very few seriously great improvisers of cello. Most people who play it well have come through the classical realm, and they're not really ever taught to improvise. They're taught to read the dots. And so to get someone with his level of technique it's really rare to find someone who also solos. They're getting to be more, thankfully, but that is still a very rare thing. The fact that he has common love of forms of music that I do. He loves early American blues and can really play on them, which is amazing. And he also really loves the singer-songwriter canon. And so to find someone with his level of technique who can also play all those different styles, and probably one of the most practical things is he can hold down a bass part. I mean, he plays beautiful pizzicato bass on the cello, and then he can do great solos. And I toured for a while with a bass player in the States, a wonderful bass player. We spent all the profits of the tour on excess baggage for the bass and the rental giant coffin for his bass. It was just amazing that you couldn't get to town and get a taxi. You had to get a van. You don't think about how difficult it is to tour with a stand-up bass. And especially this musician I toured with, Kerry Black, here in the States, wonderful musician, wonderful. But he wouldn't put the bass in, it had to be one of those incredibly impermeable, very expensive cases to fly with. And so, yeah, I couldn't afford to tour with a bass player. So getting Peter is kind of like getting 3 or 4 musicians. He plays mandolin, he sings harmonies, he plays pizzicato bass lines and does cello solos. Like, wow, okay. And he's funny, although he acts like he's not. So, that's where do you find someone like that? You have to go to the western edge of Australia, clearly. Anyway, I think that your first question is, how did I find him?
Yeah.
He was at Woodford. The first place I found him, the first place we played together was Woodford Festival. But I'd met him and his partner then, Robin, in a few other places, one in Scotland. And I knew he was a cellist. And I was at a festival in Scotland, and I said, hey, you want to sit in? Because I was strength of numbers. I had a really weird gig there. And he said, my cello is on the mainland. This was on an island off of Scotland. And so we could have played then, but no, we had to wait another year. And I just offered him to play the Troubadour the night before for the workers. And it was totally low key. I didn't know. I thought he could, maybe he was total crap or something. I don't know anything about how good he was. And he just blew me away on that first set. And then I said, okay, any set you want to play on, it's yours, that festival. And he played on all except for one, I think. And that's the start. And we've been playing together as much as possible since then.
You do a lot of festivals, and overall, how do you like the festival environment? I'm guessing you would come across some festivals that aren't run as well as others in terms of organisation, but overall, they must provide a great opportunity to introduce yourself to new audiences.
Well, professionally, yes, for that reason, but for personally, it's, being a touring musician and often a solo touring musician is musically lonely, and it's such a joy to hang out with your peers. I chase my peers all around the world. I see my friend Del Rey, she's 2 days ahead of me at the same club, and I'm like, damn, I wish I could say hello to her. So it's a weird world where our colleagues, we never see them except for at festivals and music camps. So it's just kind of this joyous it is a little weird being a musician in a way, like our lifestyle and everything is strange. And so it's such a joy to hang with people who have a common experience, and you can just laugh and, talk about the terrible gigs. And it's just such a rare thing to hang with your peers. And it is a beautiful thing because of festivals for that reason.
Talk about the recording process for you. I imagine you wouldn't be someone that likes to get bogged too much down in the recording and production process. You like to keep it as live as possible. Would that be right?
That's exactly right. And I would say I probably shoot myself in the foot a bit because I'd rather get it done. I'm not like a Steely, what are they called? Steely Dan.
Steely Dan.
Amazing band, but they were not live. They were all about the beauty of the studio. And I'm much more about the song and the arrangement and getting it done and getting to the audience. I'm much more of a live performer than a studio recording artist, I think. And also, just about every recording I've ever done has been on an incredibly short budget. So there's a lot of stress in not going over budget and getting it done. And, I haven't had that many very relaxing times in the studio. So I don't know what it would be like if I had, a big budget and a great crew to say, let's support this. But maybe it would just be terrible. Maybe it would be really fun. I don't know.
Now, in a normal world, you'd spend most of your year on the road touring. Does that provide any opportunities for songwriting, or is that something you usually leave until you're back at home base?
My group usually, my group has been pretty great about meeting weekly for over 40 years. So I would still write on the road, but not as much as I would like, I guess. I would write a line or two on the song that I'm working on, and we'd send it by email. I mean, not in the early days, but for much of the group, we'll send each other the songs by email by the deadline. So I would always write, and I would meet people on the road that had great stories. It's kind of an interesting problem hanging out in one place for a year and a half due to COVID. That I'm not meeting. I realize I use some of the exciting people I meet, little bits and pieces of them in my songs, and it's been an interesting time of isolation.
And just one last thing before I let you go. I know it's hard to make plans at the moment, the way things are, but what are your plans for the rest of this year in terms of any new music to expect, or the possibility of touring?
I'm working on an album, and I'm a little stalled on it right now, but I'm trying to get my butt in gear. It's going to be an album of new songs and some fancy instrumental pieces from my music degree. So I'm recording some fantastic arrangements for guitar, and I wanted to do kind of back and forth, a singer-songwriter and then an instrumental back and forth. So about half my own material and half stuff that I've been jumping through hoops in school for. So that's in the works, and a few things are done, but a lot of things need to be finished. So, and beyond that, I'm not thinking at all, really. I have one house concert here in LA, and that's it. And it's an outside house concert. I have no gigs. It's amazing. I think I toured heavily since the 70s. So it's been kind of fantastic. I planted a garden, I got to know my chickens, and it's all, I've had a great time being in one place. It actually, I'm not but it does feel very weird. I've never in my life stayed in one place this long in my entire life. So, experiencing it, it's great.
Hey, Kristina, thanks for your time. It's been great to catch up with you, and you don't need me to tell you how much you love down here in Australia, and I'm sure once everything's back to normal again, whenever that may be, we'll see you down here again.
I can't wait. And John, you're an inspired interviewer. You ask questions I've never been asked before and ask them in fresh ways. So thank you for that.
Oh, kind words. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I'll look forward to running into you in person someday.
I'll be here with bells on. No worries. Thanks, Kristina.
Bye-bye.
You take care. Bye-bye.